You ever salute someone you used to babysit? I don't mean that as a joke. I mean it as a nightmare. When they handed me command, I wasn't staring down an enemy. I was staring down 6 men who'd taught me how to clear a room. Men who'd chew me out for bad salutes and worse attitude. Men who'd watched me puke during my first gas chamber run. And now I was supposed to tell them where to die? This is not a story about glory. This is not a speech you give at a banquet. This is what happens when the army give a woman a battlefield promotion and says, fix it, and the only people left to fix it with are the ghosts of your own junior years. They didn't mutiny. That would have been clean. What they did was worse. They followed me, and that's when everything went quiet. The first time I walked into the command tent, Sergeant Major Delgado didn't stand up. He didn't have to. He was 53 years old, 3 wars deep, and had forgotten more about combat logistics than I'd ever learned. I was 31, newly promoted to captain after the previous CO took shrapnel through the jaw. My name was now on the roster as commander of Joint Logistics Unit 7, a fancy title for a supply convoy that ran the deadliest stretch of highway in the northern sector. Delgado looked at me over his coffee cup. His eyes said nothing. Ma'am, he said, not warm, not cold, just accurate. Behind him, Staff Sergeant Reyes pretended to study a map. Sergeant First Class Okonkwo sharpened a knife he didn't need to sharpen. Corporal Voss, who'd been my squad mate when we were both privates 5 years ago, stared at the ground like it held the secrets of the universe. They'd all outranked me once. Every single one. The only person who smiled was Specialist Tran, our radio operator, who was 22 and hadn't known me long enough to remember when I couldn't do a pull-up. Captain on deck, Tran said cheerfully. No one moved. I set my helmet on the folding table. Let's cut the manure. I know how you feel. I felt it too when they gave me this. But we have 72 hours to move 40 tons of medical supplies through the Badlands, and the last 3 convoys didn't come back. So whatever grief you have with the promotion system, bottle it. We have work. Silence. Then Delgado snorted. Not laughter. Something older. He stood up, slow like his knees hurt, and walked to the map. Badlands are mined, mortared, and watched by every spotter with a cell phone. The last convoy took a different route each time. Didn't matter. They knew. Then, we don't take a route, I said. Okonkwo looked up. The knife stopped moving. Mom. We take a river. Everyone stared at me like I'd suggested flying. Reyes broke first. She was a short, stocky woman from El Paso who'd once arm wrestled a special forces operator to a draw and never let anyone forget it. Captain, there's no river on the map. There's a dry riverbed, I said. Seasonal. Runs parallel to Highway 17 for 18 clicks, then cuts south behind a ridgeline. Satellite imagery shows it's been dry for 2 years. No vegetation means no footprints. No footprints means no IEDs buried by locals who don't want to blow up their own crops. Delgado leaned over the map. His finger traced the line I'd drawn in my head 100 times since midnight. That ridgeline is within mortar range of the eastern hills, which is why we move at night, and why we send a diversion. Okonkwo resumed sharpening. What kind of diversion? I pulled out a second map. 3 vehicles, empty, take Highway 17 at 1900 hours. Running lights on. Radio chatter like a normal convoy. They drive slow, draw fire, and when the enemy commits, they pull back to the rally point. Meanwhile, the real convoy, 7 vehicles full cargo, takes the riverbed, no lights, no radio, and pushes hard to the crossing. Voss finally looked up. His face was pale, the kind of pale that came from seeing things he couldn't unsee. Who leads the diversion? Me. The word landed like a rock in still water. Delgado's jaw tightened. Captain, with respect. That's an order, Sergeant Major. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the generator outside humming its low, desperate song. Reyes crossed her arms. You put yourself on the bait team and expect us to trust your judgment on the main body? I expect you to follow orders. That's not what I asked. I looked at her. Really looked. She'd been my training NCO at Fort Leonard Wood. She'd made me run until I puked, then made me run again. She'd told me I had potential, but no grit, and for 2 years, I'd proven her right by being average. Then I'd transferred units, grown up, come back as an officer, and now here we were. You're right, I said. That's not what you asked. You asked if you should trust me. Here's my answer. No. Don't trust me. Trust the plan. Trust that I wouldn't volunteer for a suicide run unless I believed the main body had a chance. And trust that if I'm wrong, you'll have a clear chain of command to report my mistakes. Reyes didn't blink, but something shifted behind her eyes. Respect, maybe. Or just the exhaustion of a woman who'd buried too many friends to argue with a plan that might work. Okonkwo stood. He was 6'4", built like a refrigerator, and spoke so softly you had to lean in to hear him. I'll drive the diversion. No, I said. You're on the main body. I need your weight if they hit the riverbed. Then I go with you. Not your call, Sergeant. For a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he sheathed the knife and nodded once. A small movement, but it meant more than a speech. Tran raised a hand like we were in a classroom. Captain, who's on the diversion with you? 3 volunteers, I said. Anyone who wants to drive empty trucks into an ambush, see me after this briefing. No judgment if nobody raises their hand. I'll pull names from a hat. Voss stood up. His hand was shaking, but his voice wasn't. I'll go. Corporal, I said I'll go. I want to say no. Voss and I had been privates together. We'd shared a Koenig box during a sandstorm, played cards by flashlight, talked about our families like they existed in a different universe. He'd gotten married 6 months ago. His wife was pregnant. He shouldn't have been anywhere near a diversion team. But he was a soldier, and soldiers don't get to say no. Second vehicle, I said. Thank you. Reyes sighed, long and heavy. Put me on the main body. Someone has to keep Delgado from having a heart attack when you don't check in on time. Delgado didn't laugh. He was writing something on a scrap of paper. When he finished, he folded it and handed it to me. Open it when you're done. Not before. What is it? Instructions for my replacement if you get us all killed. He walked out of the tent before I could respond. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the hood of my Humvee and watched the stars bleed across the sky. The base was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant everyone was thinking the same thing and nobody wanted to say it. Tran found me there. She carried 2 cups of coffee and sat on the ground, leaning against my front tire. You know they're going to follow you, she said. Not because of the plan. Because of the way you handled Delgado. I didn't handle him. I gave him an order. Yeah. She sipped her coffee. That's what I mean. The old captain, he would have yelled, threatened, pulled rank until the walls shook. You just stood there, like you knew something they didn't. I didn't feel like I knew anything. I felt like I was pretending to be a captain while the real captains were in hospitals or body bags. What if I'm wrong, Tran? What if this whole thing falls apart and 40 tons of medicine burn in a dry riverbed? She looked up at me. In a low light, she looked younger than 22. But her voice was ancient. Then we burn with it. And we do it together. That's the deal, isn't it? That's what we signed up for. I wanted to argue. But she was right. The deal wasn't success. The deal was trying. 18 hours until movement. I finished my coffee and went back to the tent to check the vehicles one more time. The morning of the operation, I found Delgado in the motor pool. He was kneeling next to the lead truck of the diversion team, running his hand along the undercarriage like he was reading Braille. When he saw me, he didn't stand. He just kept moving his hand. Secondary ID trigger, he said. Magnetic. Someone slapped it on last night. My blood went cold. Is it live? No, they forgot to arm it. Or they wanted us to find it. He pulled the device out and held it up. It was small, ugly, and packed with enough explosive to turn the truck into confetti. Someone on base knows what we're planning. I looked around the motor pool. Mechanics pretended not to watch. A pair of MPs walked the perimeter, rifles slung, eyes forward. Anyone could have done it. Anyone could be reporting back. Do we delay? I asked. Delgado crushed the detonator under his boot. No, we move up the timeline. Whoever placed this expects us to panic, search, waste daylight. We do the opposite. We leave in 4 hours instead of 12. That's insane. The diversion needs darkness. The diversion needs surprise. Darkness is just a tool. He stood, dusting off his knees. Captain, I've been doing this since before you were born. The enemy isn't stupid. They know we know they know. The only way to win is to do what they don't expect. And what's that? He smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Win. I gathered the team in the command tent. For hours. No hositashchen. I explained the accelerated timeline, the IED, the possibility of a leak on base. No one panicked. No one asked to be reassigned. Reyes cracked her knuckles. So we're doing this now. Now. Tran was already on the radio, confirming frequencies. Okonkwo loaded his personal weapon with slow, deliberate movements. Voss sat in the corner, eyes closed, lips moving silently. Praying, maybe, or just rehearsing. I pulled him aside. You don't have to drive the diversion. I can find someone else. Like who? Tran's too small to reach the pedals. Reyes is needed on the main body. Okonkwo weighs as much as the cargo. He opened his eyes. I'm the only one left, Captain. We both know it. The riverbed route is safer. No, it's not. It's just different. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Remember that night in basic? When you got heat stroke and I carried you 2 miles to the aid station. I remember. You weighed nothing back then. Skinny kid from Ohio who couldn't do a push-up. Now you're giving orders to men who used to yell at you for bad socks. He shook his head. I'm not going to let you die in a dry riverbed. Not after all that. I didn't know what to say, so I did what leaders do. I nodded, squeezed a shoulder, and walked back to the map. For hours, we loaded the diversion vehicles first. Empty pallets, sandbags to simulate weight, and 3 crates of expired rations that would look like medical supplies on thermal imaging. Voss took the lead truck. I took the second. A young private named Harmon, fresh from training and scared out of his mind, took the third. Stay close, I told him. When the shooting starts, don't stop. Don't look back. Just drive to the rally point and wait 5 minutes. After that, you're on your own. Harmon's hands were white on the steering wheel. What if they hit us before the rally point? Then you drive faster. Not helpful, but honest. The main body moved first. 7 trucks, no lights, crawling toward the riverbed like a snake through tall grass. Delgado led them. Reyes drove, rear security. Okonkwo rode shotgun in the lead vehicle with a grenade launcher and a grim expression. I watched them disappear into the dust and felt something tear loose in my chest. Not fear, something older. Loneliness, maybe. Or the weight of knowing that half my team was heading into danger I couldn't control. Tran's voice crackled over the headset. Main body reports, first checkpoint reached. No contacts. Riverbed is clear. Copy. Maintain radio silence until the diversion is engaged. Captain, she hesitated. Be careful out there. You too. I clicked off and started the engine. The diversion rolled out at noon, which was the stupidest possible time to drive through the Badlands. The sun was high, the heat was brutal, and every sniper within 10 miles had perfect visibility. That was the point. We wanted to be seen. We wanted to be shot at. For the first 20 minutes, nothing happened. The road stretched ahead, cracked, and bleeding heat mirages. Voss's truck kicked up a curtain of dust that made it impossible to see more than 50 meters. Harmon followed, so close I could see his lips moving, still praying, probably. Then, the first round hit. It wasn't an IED. It was a mortar, and it landed 50 meters to my left, close enough to rock the truck, but not close enough to stop it. Incoming, I said over the net. Maintain speed. More rounds fell. One hit the road behind Harmon, cratering the asphalt and showering my windshield with gravel. He swerved, corrected, kept driving. Good kid. I scanned the eastern hills through my binoculars. Muzzle flash. There. A ridge line about 800 meters out. Mortar team, maybe 2. They'd fire, reposition, fire again. Standard hit and run. Voss, I said. When we pass the overturned fuel truck, brake left and draw their fire. Harmon, you brake right. I'll stay center. And do what? Voss asked. Make them choose. The overturned fuel truck was a landmark everyone knew. A burned-out skeleton from a convoy hit 6 months ago. Bones of the driver still inside, according to rumor. I never checked. Some things you don't need to know. We reached it. Voss broke left. Harmon broke right. I stayed straight, foot to the floor, engine screaming. The mortar fire shifted. 2 rounds landed near Voss. One hit close enough to Harmon that I saw his truck lift off the ground and settle back down like a wounded animal. But he kept driving. The ridge line went quiet. Either they'd run out of ammo or they were repositioning for a second volley. Either way, we had maybe 90 seconds before they started again. Rally point in 2 clicks, I said. Stay with me. Then the second trap triggered. Not mortars. Not IEDs. Something worse. A voice came over the unsecured frequency. Clear, calm, and deeply wrong. Captain Chun, this is Colonel Massoud of the Easter Brigade. I understand you have medical supplies we need. Perhaps we can discuss a trade. My blood turned to ice. He knew my name. He knew my frequency. He knew exactly what I was carrying. And he was talking to me on an open net that every soldier in both convoys could hear. I have 3 of your soldiers, Masood continued. They survived the last convoy. You did not retrieve their bodies. We did. They are alive, Captain. For now. I keyed the mic, prove it. A pause. Then a man's voice, ragged and terrified. This is Specialist Morrison. Unit 7. They have us in a tunnel. Please don't. The transmission cut. Morrison. I remember that name. He'd been on the second convoy. Missing, presumed dead. We'd notified his mother 2 months ago. Masood came back. You have 30 minutes to divert your main convoy to the eastern crossing. Bring the medical supplies. Your soldiers will be released. If you continue to the riverbed, I will execute 1 hostage every 15 minutes until you change course. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was racing through options, none of them good. Voss's voice cut in, low and urgent. Captain, you can't. You know you can't. The eastern crossing is a kill box. They'll take the supplies and kill everyone. I know. Then, why are you hesitating? Because Morrison was alive. Because his mother thought he was dead. Because I had the power to save him. And that power came with a price I wasn't sure I could pay. The 30-minute clock started in my head. I made a decision. Voss, Harmon, continue to the rally point. I'm breaking off to contact the main body. Alone. Harmon's voice cracked. I'll be fine. Just keep moving. I cranked the wheel and drove off the road, bouncing across hardpan toward a dry wash that would hide me from the hills. Behind me, the 2 trucks continued toward the rally point, dust plumes marking their progress like funeral banners. I found a shallow gully and killed the engine. Tran answered on the first click. Captain, we heard everything. Patch me to Delgado. A moment of static, then the sergeant major's gravel voice. Mom, you heard the offer. I heard it. What do you think? Silence. Then, I think Masood is lying. He doesn't have 3 hostages. He has 1. Morrison. The others are dead. He's using the one to bait us into the crossing. You don't know that. I know men like Masood. I've been fighting them for 20 years. They don't keep prisoners alive unless they need something. What they need is your medicine. Once they have it, everyone dies. I closed my eyes. The dry wash smelled like dust and diesel and the faint coppery scent of old blood. Maybe my imagination. Maybe not. Sergeant Major, I'm not leaving a soldier behind. Then, you're not a captain. You're a civilian with a gun. The words stung. Not because they were cruel, because they were true. I sat in the silence for a long moment. The sun was beginning to tilt toward the west. Shadows stretched across the desert floor, like fingers reaching for something they couldn't quite grasp. Give me another option, I said finally. Delgado didn't answer immediately. I could hear him breathing, slow and measured like a man calculating odds that didn't favor him. There's an old access road, he said, unmapped, runs behind the eastern hills to a wadi that leads to the tunnel network. I used it during the last war. If Masood is holding Morrison anywhere, it's there. How do you know? Because I helped build the tunnels. 20 years ago, before they were enemy tunnels. Back when we were allies, the world shifted. I hadn't known that. No one had known that. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because I didn't think it would matter. But now, he paused. Now I think it's the only way. I keyed the mic, send me the coordinates. And Delgado, yes, ma'am. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to do something very stupid. I smiled despite myself. I know. The coordinates came through. I plotted the route in my head. 14 clicks cross-country, no roads, no cover, just open desert and the setting sun at my back. I started the engine and drove toward the eastern hills. Behind me, the diversion team reached the rally point. Ahead of me, a man I'd never met waited in a tunnel, hoping for a rescue that might never come. And somewhere in the riverbed, the main convoy rolled on, carrying 40 tons of medicine toward a destination that was no longer certain. The clock had 22 minutes left. I drove faster. The eastern hills looked different up close. From a distance, they were just wrinkles on the desert, brown and unforgiving like the rest of this godforsaken country. But up close, I saw the caves. Dozens of them. Dark mouths cut into the rock. Some natural, some carved by hands that had been gone for centuries. Delgado's access road was barely a road. 2 tire tracks worn into the stone, half hidden by gravel and the bones of dead shrubs. I killed my headlights and drove by memory counting the turns in my head. First left at the dry well. Second, right at the fallen boulder that looked like a camel. Third, left into the wadi. The wadi was a canyon, narrow and deep, with walls that rose 30 meters on either side. Perfect embûche terrain. I drove slow, engine barely above idle, listening for anything that didn't belong. Nothing. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a rock slide that looked natural until I got close enough to see the handholds. Someone had moved those rocks recently. The edges were fresh, unweathered by wind. I parked the truck behind a boulder and grabbed my rifle. Check weapon. Check comms. Check the small mirror I'd taped to my wrist, useful for looking around corners without exposing my head. Then I moved. The tunnel was cold. Not desert cold, which is sharp and dry, but underground cold, the kind that seeps into your bones and reminds you that the earth doesn't care if you live or die. I walked slow, one hand on the wall, the other on my rifle. The first guard was asleep. I almost laughed. A man in his 40s, cheap uniform, rifle across his lap, head leaned back against a rock with his mouth open. He'd propped a cigarette behind his ear and forgotten to light it. I could have killed him. Should have, probably. But I'd never shot a sleeping man, and I wasn't going to start today. Instead, I pulled the pin on a flashbang, rolled it past his feet, and turned away. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. The guard screamed, clawed at his eyes, stumbled into the wall. I stepped over him and kept moving. The tunnel split 3 ways. Delgado's map said left led to storage, center led to living quarters, right led to the main cavern. I took right, moving fast, counted my steps. The main cavern was huge, bigger than I'd expected. 50 meters across, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. Someone had strung electric lights along the walls. Powered by a generator, I could hear humming in the distance. And in the center of the cavern, tied to a wooden chair, was Specialist Morrison. He looked worse than I'd imagined. Thin, bruised, one eye swollen shut. His uniform was torn, and I could see the marks of burns on his arms, cigarette burns, small and precise and deliberate. But he was alive. 3 guards stood around him. 2 were playing cards on an ammunition crate. The third was pacing, talking into a radio, his voice too low for me to hear. I counted weapons. 3 AKs. 1 pistol on the pacing man. No body armor on any of them. I could take them. Maybe. If I was fast. If I didn't miss. But there was another door at the far end of the cavern. Wooden. Old. And behind it I could hear voices. More than 1. More than 3. This wasn't a small outpost. This was a headquarters. I keyed my mic, barely whispering. Tran. I'm in. Multiple hostiles. Need extraction at the wadi entrance in 20 minutes. Copy. Sending support. No. Just extraction. The main body stays on mission. Captain, that's an order. I clicked off before she could argue. The pacing guard stopped. He turned toward my hiding spot, frowning. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. He walked closer. 2 meters. 1. I stepped out. I said. His eyes went wide. His hand moved toward his pistol. I shot him in the thigh. Not fatal, but painful. He went down screaming, and the card players scrambled for their rifles. I put a round into the table between them. Not to kill, to intimidate. Splinters exploded. The rifles clattered to the ground. Hands up, I said. Both of you. Now. They raised their hands. The wounded guard kept screaming. Morrison lifted his head, saw me, and started crying. I didn't have time for crying. Can you walk? I asked. He nodded, sniffled, tried to stand. His legs gave out. Broken, maybe, or just weak from weeks of captivity. I slung my rifle, grabbed him under the arms, and dragged him toward the tunnel. The card players watched me go. They didn't follow. Good. The wooden door at the far end burst open. More guards. At least 6, with better weapons and worse attitudes. I pulled Morrison behind a stack of crates and returned fire. 3 rounds, controlled, aimed. 1 guard went down. The others scattered. Tran, I shouted into the mic now. I need that extraction now. Support is 10 minutes out. Hold your position. I don't have 10 minutes. More gunfire. Craters erupted around me. Morrison curled into a ball, hands over his head, sobbing. I fired again. Another guard dropped. Then my rifle clicked empty. I slapped a new magazine in, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. There were too many. They were flanking me, moving through the shadows, getting closer. This was it. This was where I died. in a cold tunnel under a foreign hill, a million miles from home, with a soldier I'd never met and a team that couldn't save me. Then I heard it. Engines. Multiple engines. Revving hard, coming fast. The guard heard it too. They hesitated, looked at each other, looked at me. The tunnel entrance exploded with light. 2 trucks. Not mine. Not the main body. Voss and Harmon. They'd driven straight into the wadi, headlights blazing, mounted machine guns roaring. Harmon was shooting left-handed, which I knew he'd never trained to do, but he was hitting targets anyway. Voss drove with one hand and fired a pistol out the window with the other like a man in a bad action movie. The guards broke. They ran for the wooden door, for the side tunnels, for anywhere that wasn't here. I dragged Morrison to Voss's truck. Harmon jumped out, grabbed Morrison's other arm, and we heaved him into the bed like a sack of grain. Go! I shouted. Voss didn't need to be told twice. He threw the truck in reverse, bounced over a crate, and raced back toward the tunnel entrance. Behind us, the cavern filled with more guards. More gunfire. A bullet tore through the canvas cover over my head. Another sparked off the tailgate. Then we were out. Sunlight. Dust. The wadi walls rushing past. Harmon returned fire over the tailgate, cool as anything. When he ran out of ammo, he switched to Morrison's abandoned rifle and kept shooting. I looked at Voss. You came back. You're welcome. I told you to wait at the rally point, and I told you I wasn't going to let you die in a dry riverbed. He glanced at me, and for a second, he wasn't a corporal following orders. He was a friend. Same deal, Captain. Same deal. The wadi opened into the desert. I keyed the mic. Tran, we're out. Morrison is secure. But we need a medical evacuation, and we need it now. Copy. Medevac is airborne. ETA 12 minutes. Morrison was bleeding from a wound I hadn't seen. A gash on his ribs, deep enough to show bone. Harmon pressed a field dressing against it, held it there, talked to him in a low, steady voice. You're okay. You're okay. We've got you. I turned to Voss. Get us to the riverbed. We need to rejoin the main body. The main body is still an hour out, and we're almost out of fuel. Then, drive until we're not. He nodded and pushed the truck harder. The engine whined in protest. Dust boiled behind us. I checked my rifle. 17 rounds left. Not enough for another fight. Probably not enough for the fight we were already in. The sun touched the horizon. Shadows stretched across the desert like fingers reaching for something they couldn't quite grasp. And somewhere ahead, the main convoy rolled on, carrying 40 tons of medicine toward a destination that was no longer certain. The clock had run out. We found a main body at the riverbed crossing. Delgado had halted the convoy in a defensive perimeter, trucks in a circle, weapons facing out, everyone watching the hills. When he saw our trucks limping toward him, he walked out to meet us, face unreadable. Morrison, he asked. Alive. Bad shape, but alive. He looked at the blood on my uniform, the bullet holes in the truck, the tears on Harmon's face. Then he looked at me. You're an idiot, he said. Yes, Sergeant Major. A brave idiot, but still an idiot. I know. He clapped me on the shoulder. It was the first time he'd touched me in a way that wasn't professional. Get Morrison to the medic. Then come find me. We have a problem. The problem was the eastern crossing. Massoud hadn't waited for my answer. He'd moved his forces toward the riverbed, guessing, correctly, that I'd try to rescue Morrison without diverting the main convoy. His spotters were on the ridge line now, calling in mortar strikes that landed closer with each volley. We can't stay here, Reyes said. She was crouched behind a truck, binoculars pressed to her eyes. They're bracketing us. Next round hits the perimeter. Can we move? Not in daylight. They'd pick us apart. Okonkwo was loading his grenade launcher with slow, deliberate movements. Then we fight at night. Wait for dark, then push through. They'll have night vision, Delgado said. So will we. And we have something they don't. What's that? Okonkwo pointed at me. A captain who just walked into a tunnel full of enemy fighters and walked out with a hostage. They're scared of her now. You could see it. The way they hesitated. I didn't feel scary. I felt tired. Tired and dirty and out of ideas. But I couldn't say that. So I said something else. We wait for dark. Then we move fast and loud. Headlights on. Radios blaring. Make them think we're charging the ridge line. And when they shoot at us, Reyes asked, we shoot back. Harder. It wasn't a plan. It was a prayer with guns. But everyone nodded. The sun dipped below the horizon. We moved. The next 3 hours were chaos. I don't mean that in a dramatic way. I mean in the way that war actually is: loud, confusing, full of decisions that feel right in the moment and seem insane 5 minutes later. We hit the ridgeline with everything we had. Headlights, machine guns, Okonkwo's grenade launcher, which he fired so fast the barrel started to glow. Tran was on the radio, coordinating with an air support that never came, but sounded convincing enough to make the enemy hesitate. Masoud's fighters fired back. Mortars, rifles, rocket-propelled grenades that screamed over our heads and exploded in the darkness like angry stars. Voss drove the lead truck with Morrison in the passenger seat, bandaged, drugged, but alive. Harmon rode shotgun, firing with one hand and reloading with the other. Reyes took a round to her shoulder armor. It knocked her down, but she got back up, switched hands, kept shooting. Delgado walked through the gunfire like a man strolling through a park. He didn't duck. He didn't flinch. He just pointed at targets and said things like there and now in a voice so calm it made me want to scream. And me? I drove straight up the ridge line, through the smoke and the dust and the screaming, my rifle wedged between the steering wheel and the door, firing whenever I saw a muzzle flash. We crested the ridge at midnight. The enemy broke. Not because we were better fighters. Not because we had better weapons. Because they'd expected a convoy of scared supply drivers. And what they got was a bunch of maniacs who wouldn't stop coming. I watched them run. Figures disappearing into the darkness, dropping weapons, forgetting to shoot back. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. We made the crossing at 0200. The medical supplies were offloaded by sunrise. Morrison was airlifted to a field hospital. Harmon fell asleep in the back of a truck with his rifle still in his hands. Okonkwo cleaned his grenade launcher and didn't say a word. Reyes had her shoulder bandaged. She sat next to me on the tailgate of my Humvee, watching the sun rise over a battlefield that still smelled like smoke. "You did good," she said. "We did good." "No, I mean you. Specifically. You did good." She looked at me sideways. "I didn't think you would. When they gave you the promotion, I figured you'd last a week. Maybe two. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Don't mention it." She stood, stretched, winced at her shoulder. "But for what it's worth, I was wrong. You got grit now. Real grit. The kind you can't teach." She walked away before I could answer. I sat alone for a while, watching the sun climb higher. The desert was quiet now. Not the quiet of fear. The quiet of exhaustion. The kind that comes after a storm. My hand drifted to my pocket. Delgado's note. I'd forgotten about it. I pulled it out, unfolded it, read it. "Captain Shun, if you're reading this, you survived. Which means you're either very lucky or very good. I'm not sure which yet, but I'm willing to find out. Here's what I couldn't say in front of the others. I was wrong about you. When they gave you this unit, I thought they'd made a mistake. You were too young, too inexperienced, too close to the people you were supposed to command. But that last part, the part about being close, that's not a weakness. It's the whole point. The old captain, the one before you, he kept his distance. Thought it made him professional. All it made him was alone. And when the shrapnel hit him, there was no one close enough to pull him out of the blast. You're different. You get your hands dirty. You bleed with your people. You walked into a tunnel full of enemy fighters for a soldier you'd never met. And you walked out with him alive. That's not luck. That's leadership. So here's my official report. Captain Shun is competent, courageous, and occasionally insane. Recommend immediate promotion and transfer to a unit where her talents won't be wasted on supply convoys. But between you and me, I'm glad you're my captain. SGM Delgado. I folded the note and put it back in my pocket. Then I went to find Voss. He was sitting against a tire, eyes closed, face slack. I sat down next to him. "You awake?" "No." "Good. I wanted to say something without you looking at me." He opened one eye. "I'm looking." "I know." I stared at the sky. "Thank you for coming back." "You didn't have to." "Yeah, I did." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because you're the only captain I've ever had who remembered my name without looking at my patch. And because..." He paused. "Because we were privates together. That means something, even if you outrank me now." I nodded. "It means something." We sat in silence until the sun was fully up. Then we went back to work. 3 weeks later, I got a new assignment. Not a transfer. A promotion. Major. And a new unit. Infantry this time, not supply. Real combat. Real responsibility. I stood in front of Joint Logistics Unit 7 for the last time. The same tent. The same map. The same faces, except for Morrison, who was still in hospital, but expected to make a full recovery. Delgado stood at attention. So did Reyes. Okonkwo. Voss. Harmon. Tran. Even the mechanics, and the cooks, and the radio operators who'd stayed in the rear while we fought. I cleared my throat. I'm not good at speeches, I said. You know that. So I'll keep this short. I looked at each of them in turn. When they gave me this unit, I thought I'd fail. I thought you'd hate me. I thought I'd spend every day pretending to be something I wasn't. A few of them smiled. Delgado didn't. But you didn't let me fail. You didn't let me pretend. You made me earn it. Every salute, every order, every decision. And because of that, I'm actually ready for the next thing. Whatever it is. I paused. Thank you. That's all I came to say. Reyes stepped forward. She shook my hand, firm, professional, the way she taught me years ago. Don't screw up the next unit, she said. They won't be as forgiving as us. I'll try not to. Okonkwo hugged me. I didn't expect it. He was 6'4" and built like a refrigerator, and he hugged me like I was his little sister. You're right to us, he said. Don't be a stranger. I won't. Harmon saluted. Crisp. Correct. The best salute I'd ever seen from someone who'd learned to shoot left-handed in the middle of a firefight. Captain, he said. Private. Voss just stood there. He didn't salute. He didn't shake my hand. He looked at me with the same expression he'd worn in basic training, when we were both scared kids trying to survive a sandstorm. Buy you a beer when this is over? He asked. Definitely. And then Delgado. He didn't move. He just stood at attention, staring straight ahead, like he was waiting for something. I walked over to him. Sergeant Major. Major, he said. We looked at each other. 2 decades of experience between us, most of his. A rank difference that no longer felt like a gulf. I read your note, I said. Did you? Every word. And I'm keeping it. In my pocket. For the next time I think I can't do something. His expression didn't change. But his eyes softened just a little. You'll do fine, Major. You were born for this. Born for supply, convoys, born to lead. He finally moved, extending his hand. Take care of yourself out there. You too, Sergeant Major. I climbed into the Humvee that would take me to the airfield. Tran was driving. She'd volunteered, probably because she wanted to say something without the others listening. You know they're going to talk about you, she said. For years. The captain who walked into a tunnel and walked out with a hostage. They'll forget. No, they won't. Soldiers don't forget things like that. It's the only thing we're good at. I looked out the window at the desert. The same hills, the same endless blue sky. Tran, I said. Yeah. Thank you for following me, even when I was being an idiot. She grinned. Following idiots is my specialty. We drove in silence to the airfield. The plane ride was long. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching the desert shrink to a brown smudge, then disappear entirely. The mountains came next, then the coast, then the sea, green and gray and endless. Somewhere below, my old unit was packing up, loading trucks, filing reports, preparing for the next mission without me. And somewhere in a field hospital, Morrison was learning to walk again. He'd sent me a message. 2 words, thank you. I pulled Delgado's note out of my pocket. Read it again. Folded it. Put it back. The woman sitting next to me was a lieutenant colonel, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. She'd introduced herself as my new battalion commander. Read your file, she said. Interesting. Is that good or bad? She didn't answer, just smiled in a way that made me nervous. Tell me about the tunnel, she said. The real story, not the official report. I told her. About Delgado's map. About the guard I didn't kill. About Morrison's eyes when he saw me. About Voss and Harmon coming back when it didn't have to. About the moment I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. You didn't mention the shooting, she said. The guards you wounded. I didn't think it mattered. It matters. Why didn't you kill them? I thought about it. The sleeping guard. The card players. The man whose thigh I'd shot instead of his chest. Because they were soldiers, I said. Same as me. Just on the wrong side. She looked out the window. That's either very wise or very stupid. I haven't decided which. Join the club. She laughed. It was a surprising sound. Rough, genuine, nothing like the polished officer laugh I expected. You'll do, she said. Welcome to the battalion, Major. The new unit was different, bigger, more professional, less likely to hug me or call me an idiot to my face. I missed the old one immediately, but I found my rhythm, learned the names, earned the trust, made mistakes, fixed them, made different mistakes. And every night before I slept, I took out Delgado's note and read it. Not because I needed encouragement, because I needed to remember where I came from, because I needed to remember that the best leaders aren't born. They're forged in tunnels, on ridge lines, in the moments when everyone is watching and no one knows what to do. And then they do something anyway. 6 months later, I got a letter, handwritten, on cheap paper, smelling faintly of smoke. Major Chun, I don't know if you remember me. Probably not. You save a lot of people. But I'm the one you drag out of the tunnel. I'm walking now. Nokane. My wife. You remember my wife? I told you about her while we were driving? She says I talk too much. She's probably right. But I wanted to say this. Thank you for not leaving me. I know you thought about it. I saw your face when Masood made the offer. You wanted to take it. You wanted to save me the easy way. But you didn't. You chose the hard way. You chose to walk into the dark. I don't know why you did it. Maybe because you're crazy. Maybe because you're good. Maybe because you just don't know how to quit. Whatever the reason, I'm alive because of it. My son is due next month. I'm naming him after you. Not your last name, your first. Chun. So he grows up knowing that courage isn't about being strong. It's about being there when it matters. Thank you, Major. Morrison, I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in my pocket, right next to Delgado's note. The war ended 2 years later. Not with a bang. With a treaty signed in a room full of men who'd never seen a tunnel or a ridge line or a dry riverbed at midnight. I went home, to Ohio, to a house I bought but never lived in, to a family I'd missed more than I knew. My mother cooked too much food. My father asked too many questions. My little sister showed me pictures of her wedding, which I'd missed, and didn't mention it, which was her way of forgiving me. I slept in a real bed for the first time in years. And I dreamed of the desert. Not nightmares, just memories. Voss's face when he said he'd come back. Delgado's note. Morrison's letter. Tran's grin. Reyes saying I grit. Okonkwo's hug. Harmon's salute. All of it. I woke up crying. Not from sadness. From something I couldn't name. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or just the weight of being alive when so many others weren't. 10 years later, I'm a colonel now. Gray hair. Bad knees. A folder full of medals I never wear, and a drawer full of letters I can't throw away. I teach at the academy. Young officers fresh from training, full of theories about leadership and tactics and the right way to do things. I tell them stories. Not all of them, just the ones that matter. I tell them about Delgado, who taught me that authority isn't given. It's earned. About Reyes, who taught me that grit isn't something you're born with. It's something you grow. About Voss, who taught me that friendship outranks everything. About Morrison, who taught me that the hardest choices are the ones that matter most. And about myself, the captain who didn't think she was ready. The major who learned to lead. The colonel who still carries 2 pieces of paper in her pocket, worn soft from reading, faded but never forgotten. Because that's the thing about command. It's not about the rank. It's about the people who follow you. And the ones who come back for you. When you least expect it. When you need it most. The end. A pause. A breath. Then, softly, carry on.